Exercise 6-9 deals with custom metalworks and the case of a special order that it has received. So Custom Metalworks makes tables. They've received an offer for 3,000 tables at a price of $220 a piece. So in order to do this, and to access this problem, we have to see is the price worth it? So in the case of a special order, generally speaking, what we have is a price per unit that is less than regular price. So now the issue here is that this big box retailer wants a deal, and so in order to see if that's worthwhile, we have to examine what's known as our incremental revenue. In this case, if they make the sale, take 3,000 and multiply that by the $220 a piece, they bring in $660,000 of revenue. Compared to what cost do they incur? So the incremental cost. And so now this is the question that we have to ask ourselves: what goes into incremental cost? And so the accountants at Custom Metalworks aggregate what they call their per unit cost. That includes direct materials, direct labor, and then a $70 amount for overhead. Well, this is the amount that we're going to have to dig more deeply into. And as it turns out, when we decompose overhead, we have variable overhead, which is $14 per unit, and then the fixed portion is based on this volume. We have a $56 per unit, and then as allocated on the basis of $1.12 per direct labor dollar. So in other words, if we take the rate for fixed overhead is $1.12 multiplied by direct labor, $50 per unit here, and that's where we get the $56 for the fixed overhead amount. Well, the fixed overhead is merely an application of overhead. The fixed costs are not going to be changing whether we have this or not. So overall, we have, based on the volume to date, we have $56 allocation for overhead, but it's truly not an incremental cost. So what we would want to do then is to find the likes here. So we have the 125, the 50, and the 14. So our incremental cost then, if we replace this over here, would be summing the direct materials, direct labor, and then also the variable overhead, and then multiplying that by the 3,000 tables. And what we see here is that effect on income of the special order, is that we have an increase in net income of $93,000. Now, in contrast, if we took the $245 that they calculated before and multiplied that by 3,000, notice that we would report a loss of 75,000. And that is by producing and selling 3,000 more units, we would be acting as if the fixed cost would be increasing as well. So we have to be very careful as far as this is concerned. A lot of times we're presented costing information on a per unit basis, but we have to really examine, is the cost behaving as a variable cost? In other words, as we produce the 3,000 units, is it truly increasing the cost? For direct materials and direct labor, of course, that would be true. Overhead is going to be a little bit different. So here we're given the $14 out of the 70 would be considered variable overhead costs. You really have to examine, and that's why in Chapter 4 we did the regression analysis to come up with an estimate of the fixed and variable components. Otherwise, we could end up with the wrong result. So here, you would want to what do I want to do? I want to block that out so that we don't look at that in that way, because that would be erroneous.